KHTS or its ownership.
Welcome. You're listening to the Ask Brien radio show on 1220 and 98.1 FM. Mr. Engineer, since we didn't have the little and button, can we try that again? 1220 AM and 98.1 FM. The engineer has this little button that he uses.
I do.
So it's really cool, and it's got this and sound. Make pretend I'm a New Yorker. And let's put our hearts out to New York, because right now, I mean, the pandemic is everywhere. Everyone is being affected, but New York is being infected much more than anywhere else right now. Hopefully, everything can slow down and stop, but that is what's going on in the world. We have to recognize that. This is the Ask Brien radio show, and Mr. Engineer, how do you spell Brien? B-R-Y-A-N or B-R-I-A-N? I'm not sure.
Actually, neither. It's B-R-I-E-N.
Why would you spell it with an E?
Well, because E stands for a number of things, and that would be experts, effort, engineers, and I think experience is another one. I think we added that one.
Empathy.
Empathy too. Empathy
all
too.
The people that are staying home.
Yes, definitely empathy.
Okay. So obviously, our radio show is about helping businesses help themselves, and basically what we try to do each week. We've been on the air now for over 3 years. We're on our 137th episode. So anyone who wants to go back and watch any of our episodes, each week we bring along typically a guest or a special host that can talk about something specializing in some specific area of business. The last few weeks, since the stay-at-home order has come in play, we have been concentrating on the coronavirus, and we've been doing something each week specifically relating to that. Now, again, the Ask Brien radio show is part of the Ask Brien website, which is www.askbrien.com, and Ask Brien Network. Basically, if you go to that website, you'll be able to ask any type of business question to either the business community or a business expert. The difference is the business community is basically one dry cleaner asking another dry cleaner about a question about something specific to that business model. Restaurant owners can ask other restaurant owners what they're doing, what's proven successful during this crazy time period, whether or not takeout's working for them, whether or not they'd be better off just operating from somewhere, another location, etc. And that's the business community. Also, you can ask an expert. And to become an expert on the Ask Brien Network, and that's AskBrien.com, to become an expert, you have to typically have 10,000 hours of experience in one subject, or be known specifically for some area. In other words, you could be somebody that has 1,000 hours, but you come up with this great system, a great formula, and people know about you, and you've done a lot of references. We may still take you on as an expert. We actually manually, I know this is the computer age, I know everybody's automating everything, but for our experts, not everyone can become an expert. We want to make sure that we do some due diligence, so we check you out. And so you can apply, and if you apply to become an expert and you become an expert, you get your own profile page, which allows you to put up your videos, put up ebooks, post webinars, and schedule the webinars on our national webinar calendar, which anybody who is on our site can actually add to their Google Calendar and watch a webinar on any of the numerous business subjects. But we are business for business. And without any further ado, how do you spell ado?
A-D-I-E-U.
All right. I guess my spelling lectures have worked out.
Yes, they have.
So, without any further ado, from 98.1 FM and 1220 AM, we're about to begin our show. We have our co-host, Mr. Alex Grossman. Alex, you there?
Yeah, Mr. Brien Johnson, I am here, and you didn't blow my eardrum out this time. It was very nice. Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Well, I'll try to do louder on the next edition. So today
appreciate that.
we thought, I got to tell you, this is a very very difficult time for many, many people. It's not just if you work in a restaurant and they're closing you down or a retail shop. Every business is being affected. It could be anything. I mean, even lawyers and other professions are being dealing with financial issues. And many, many people, as you know, yesterday was April 1st. While it is known as April Fool's Day, and you may pass around a lot of jokes, I've also been speaking to many business owners, do surveys all the time, and we've discovered a lot of people just are having difficulty paying their rent. In fact, one of the big companies, Cheesecake Factory, which is a publicly traded corporation, announced previously that they would not have the funds to make their April rent. So we know that not being able to pay your rent has become a big, big problem. And we also know that many, many people are looking for ways that they can solve their financial problems. And so we have decided to dedicate this episode. We'll be having, my alias, Peter Bronstein, the lawyer, who knows a lot about bankruptcy law, will be on our show. And I'm not saying anyone should ever have to file bankruptcy. Hopefully nobody ever has to file bankruptcy, especially just because of what happened here. However, we also know that whether or not you are in a bad financial situation, you may have to file bankruptcy, may want to know what bankruptcy is all about so you have at least an understanding of what it is to pre-plan. Also, there are many, many people out there that may be owed money and somebody may file bankruptcy, and we want to know how that's going to affect your bill, because if somebody doesn't pay you, you can't pay somebody else. Now, while we are talking about bankruptcy and while I am a lawyer, we are not providing any legal advice. So we are telling anyone that if you have a specific question, or even if we answer the specific question, you should seek out legal counsel. This is not a legal show. I do have a legal degree, and I'm a practicing attorney in California, but that doesn't mean that you should rely on any information or advice I provide as legal advice. And without any further ado, I thought the engineer was going to say that. Okay, we are live now. Alex had a couple of questions, and I didn't know what they were. So why don't you go with your first question?
Sure. Well, let me start by saying, as an entrepreneur myself, I've been talking to a lot of other entrepreneurs and a number of VCs, and they're all worried. It used to be, you build a company, you might run it into break even, where you're running month to month essentially. You might have a little cash flow positive, or you might be in a company that's backed by a VC or other backers, and you're used to a certain amount of money coming in, people tranching you in. And at this time, you don't know where the money's coming from. And as you said, Mr. Brien Johnson, you never know if that person that you extended credit to is going to be able to pay you now, because they may be in a worse situation than you are. But as everybody's telling me today, like any other time, a good business model, a safe business model, some business models that work will continue to work. And while I'm not saying anybody should be ripping anybody off or doing anything bad, there are huge opportunities that can come out of this chaos. But that being said, the question is, you mentioned bankruptcy, and the question is really simple. What is bankruptcy? What types are there, and what choices do I have if I had to go that way? Because it scares me to think about it, but I think we need to understand it a little better.
Well, that's a very good question. And so bankruptcy in general basically was passed by the Congress and is a federal act. And basically under bankruptcy, we have different chapters of bankruptcy. Most people, when they mention the word bankruptcy, and most of the times when somebody says, oh, I'm going bankrupt, most people usually are referring to what's called a Chapter 7, which is a liquidation. And on liquidation, basically, you're taking all of your assets, you get certain exemptions, certain items that you are allowed to protect and keep, and then all the remaining assets are being sold. The assets are then sold, and cash is provided to the creditors, and that's how creditors get paid. However, that is a very general concept, and that's what mainly is referred to bankruptcy. There are other chapters of the Bankruptcy Code, and the Bankruptcy Code is also has what's called a Chapter 13. Chapter 13 is typically what we refer to as a wage earner or regular income bankruptcy, whereby it's kind of like a repayment plan, and the courts will allow you 60 months to pay back your past due debts to your creditors based on the total income you have and the total expenses you have. But having said that, there are eligibility requirements in both the 7 and the 13. There are other chapters of bankruptcy. I'm going to go over them very, very quickly because they do not typically apply to small business owners. But one would be Chapter 11, which typically, if you do not qualify or not eligible to file a Chapter 13, you might be able to file Chapter 11. Typically, it was only done for corporations and big entities, but nowadays even persons are allowed to file Chapter 11 if they don't meet the Chapter 13. The other two main issues dealing with bankruptcy are not going to apply typically to many people in the Los Angeles area. So one is a Chapter 9, which is basically a government bankruptcy. So if the city of Los Angeles wanted to file bankruptcy, or actually a number of years ago, I believe Orange County had to file bankruptcy, that was what refers to a Chapter 9. We're not going to discuss that at all today. And then also we have a Chapter 12. Chapter 12 is what's called a family farmer bankruptcy, which is a bankruptcy specifically done for farmers. And that's very, very similar to the Chapter 13 with a regular income, but obviously you have to be a farmer. There aren't too many farmers left in Los Angeles County. There may be some in Ventura County and some of the surrounding counties. And I know that we do have listeners in Ventura County, but we're not going to be discussing that. As I said, the Chapter 11 bankruptcy pretty much is a very expensive method and is really only going to be available to people that have, over $1.5 million of debts and many, many assets. And typically, most people will not be able to do that. So we're going to maintain most of our conversation today on Chapter 7 and Chapter 13 bankruptcies. And bankruptcy is basically a method whereby you are allowed to take your debts and use your debts so that you can continue life and continue to move. If you had a $10 million unsecured debt on your that you had, and you're 20 years old, you may be living the rest of your life without having a way to continue your life. So what bankruptcy does is it gives you what's called a fresh start, an opportunity to start over again, and it could be for a number of events. Now, I'm going to ask Alex, I'm going to ask the engineer. I want to know if they know. I want to give them an opportunity. But what is the biggest reason why people file bankruptcy? What debt is the biggest reason why people file bankruptcy? I'm going to ask them each, and I'll tell you what the answer is. So, Alex, why don't you go first?
Is that from a business perspective or a personal perspective, Mr. Brien Johnson?
I would say pretty much a personal perspective.
Well, people usually would do that because they can't pay their bills. Obviously, credit card debt is probably number one in my book.
Okay, it's not. Now let's ask the engineer. So he has an advantage because he knows one's out. Mr. Engineer, what do you think is the most common reason why people file bankruptcy?
I think because they're bankrupt because...
No, it's not either. It's one. You get one choice.
Oh, okay, one choice. I'm going to say it's because they are unemployed.
Neither one of you are correct. So basically, if we're on the gong show, Mr. Engineer, do you have the gong button? No, you don't have that?
I don't have the gong button, but I can make it sound.
You need to get the gong button. You already got the and button, and you got the Grossman button with the wrong voice. Now you need to get the gong button. By the time you're done, you'll have so many buttons you won't know what to do.
I know,
and
right?
I like to push the button, as I always do. Well, the number one reason why people file bankruptcy, and people are going to be shocked because they're going to say, well, doesn't everybody have this? Well, the reality is the number one reason is medical. The fact of the matter is that while you may have medical insurance, and many, many people do, the number one reason people do file bankruptcy is medical bills.
That makes sense.
Many of the people are uninsured. That's the biggest group. But there are even people that have insurance. For instance, and there's an example, my father passed away 19 years ago yesterday on April 1st, and my parents had top-of-the-line insurance plus an indemnity policy, and my father was in the hospital for 6 months. And even though he was had Blue Cross, Blue Shield, equitable indemnity policy, Medicare, okay, you would think that would be plenty. My mother got a bill at the end of his term, and it was for $522,362. So that was his bill, and that was with all that. So you can only imagine what people that don't have anything are going to be facing. And the reality is medical insurance is the number one not medical insurance, medical bills is the number one reason why people file, and it's the biggest debt that they have. Credit card debt and the other debts, they can be big, but typically medical is the number one reason. So, we'll come back with another question later on to see if you guys can try to make up for that miss, but that was one thing I wanted to go over with you. But basically, bankruptcy gives you that fresh start. So you go to the hospital, like let's say my family wasn't able to work it out with the hospital, and we were able to. My mom walks, at the time she was probably about 67 years old, $522,000 debt to pay the hospital, and she had an 800 credit score and owned her own house outright, okay? Now, I'm not going to go over the fact that we could have given the house up and all those other things. The reality is, with all that, that was one event, and it's an event that nobody expected that happened, okay? And by the way, this event is similar to what was happening now across the country. Nobody anticipated a pandemic where everybody would be forced to stay at home and not be able to bring in revenue, and then when they can't bring revenue, they can't pay their bills, they can't pay their bills, and so the people that get the bills, they can't use that, and it's, basically going all the way down the line, and we don't know how long. So basically a catastrophe such as this could classify and probably will be the number one reason why people file nowadays, although it could be any other reason. But the reality is this is a catastrophic event, and that's pretty much what bankruptcy is there for. If you have this unusual, unexpected event, bankruptcy rules were created to give a person a fresh start so that someone who's 20 years old that has a $500,000 debt from a medical bill, okay, because he didn't have insurance and he was in a coma for 2 weeks and now he's perfect again, that person can survive and continue life. Otherwise, if you have people that are unproductive and can't do anything, can't pay their debt back, well, they can't go and get the home loan. They can't go out and buy the cars. We are a consumer-driven thing, and so one of the reasons why we have the bankruptcy rules is to allow people to continue with life and say, you know what, something bad happened, we want to help you out. That's why we have the bankruptcy rules. And that bankruptcy basics, I could go over, quite a while, but I wanted to get to Alex's next question because he's been panting and going, I got a question. His hand's been raised. Ooh, Mr. Cotta. Oh, sorry. Anyway, Korshak, you're up.
Well, I got to tell you, Mr. Brien Johnson, it's kind of a depressing topic here, The whole idea of bankruptcy and medical bills, I think that a lot of people will be facing this. I have heard that, luckily, during this pandemic, some of the insurance companies are going to cover these bills, so hopefully that won't hurt, or won't hurt a lot of people. But the idea of businesses and where they are today in such a crazy state, and again, a good business model may survive, but you need cash to be able to do it. So taking it back to the business side, if I'm a business and I can't pay my bills, most of us are small entrepreneurs. How does it affect whether I'm a corporation, an LLC, a single proprietorship? How does the bankruptcy piece work, and how am I protected in that?
Well, so first of all, people that are corporations or LLCs, if they don't want to continue an operation anymore, it's a very, very easy process. They don't even need to technically file bankruptcy, although it's advised. Sole proprietors and partnerships are completely different, and there's a distinction. The distinction is that a corporation LLC is a separate legal entity. Because it is a separate legal entity, that entity itself has what's called limited liability protection. So if you have an LLP, which is a limited liability partnership, we're going to be going right to a break. We'll be right back.
The best live theater can be found right here in the Santa Clarita Valley. The Canyon Theater Guild has been entertaining audiences for decades with top quality musicals and plays. Located on Main Street in Old Town Newhall, CTG also offers workshops for the young actor in your family. For more information, call the box office at 799-2702 or go online to canyontheater.org.
As the stay-at-home order continues through the month of April, Burger King is committed to following state and federal safety guidelines when it comes to serving you, the customer. Although in-restaurant dining has closed, pickup and delivery service continues. The current hours are 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. You can mobile order through the BK app for pickup, or you can use any of the delivery services like DoorDash, Uber Eats, Grubhub, and Postmates. Burger King on Lyons at the 5 Freeway, now with service at 2 drive-through windows.
This is Bradley Gross from Santa Clarita Grocery. Santa Clarita Grocery serves fresh groceries to families, individuals, and those experiencing homelessness. At Santa Clarita Grocery, out of every dollar donated, a full 99 cents goes directly to the needs being addressed. As an all-volunteer-led organization, we operate on a 1% overhead, receiving no government funding for our operations in the community, resulting in us being one of the most efficient charities in the Santa Clarita Valley. If you're looking to support the good for our community, please consider partnering with us by donating to Santa Clarita Grocery. What is donated is specifically kept in the Santa Clarita Valley, helping over 3,000 families, including 5 other community charities. Please visit our website, santaclaritagrocery.org, or visit us on social media or call us at 425-7575. That's 425-7575.
If you have a business problem, if someone doesn't honor their agreement and you need an aggressive attorney with over 27 years experience, the Law Office of Peter Bronstein has helped partners resolve disputes, franchisees resolve disputes, and other business owners who have a challenge. Let the Law Office of Peter Bronstein take your stress away. Visit lacorporateattorney.com. Don't wait too long and lose your rights. Solve your business challenge problem today. Visit lacorporateattorney.com.
If you're in danger of losing your home to foreclosure, you need an expert. Hi, I'm Rich Sherman with Alta Realty. I've helped hundreds of Santa Clarita residents save their homes completely for free. I've got just over 20 years experience and a loan modification success rate of over 80%. I can negotiate better terms with your bank and I can save your home from foreclosure. And again, we do this completely for free. So if you're in any danger, please call me today at 661-714-1400. That number again is 661-714-1400. I'm Rich Sherman with Alta Realty. I'll be happy to help you save your home for free.
Hometown, your hometown station.
Welcome. You're listening to the Ask Brien radio show. Mr. Engineer, how do you spell Ask Brien?
Brien.
And we have our co-host, Alex Grossman, and his special guest today, which is, and I'm not schizophrenic, but my name is Peter Bronstein. I also am Brian Johnson. So I'm here today as an attorney, but I'm not providing any legal advice. I am providing information regarding bankruptcy. Ask Brien Radio Show is a show that provides business owners with business solutions to solve business problems. During the coronavirus pandemic that we're experiencing, many people have been calling in and asking questions regarding, I can't pay my rent, I can't do this, I can't do that. I'd like to get some information about bankruptcy. I don't want to file it, but I want to understand what it's all about. And before we left, Alex, why don't you repeat your question to people that were not listening?
Okay, Mr. Brien Bronstein, let me help you with that. My question was really simple. People have different types of corporate structures. So you might have a sole proprietorship, you might have a partnership, you might be an LLC, a very popular thing a lot of people are doing, or you might be an S or C corporation. And depending on that, knowing what to do, it could be really confusing. So how do I protect myself in all of those cases?
So regarding an LLC, an LLP, which is a limited liability partnership, and a corporation, all of those entities have what's called limited liability protection, meaning that the entity itself can only be liable for the assets of that entity. So if you have $10,000 in the bank or $10 million in the bank, that's the maximum liability that could have. It can't go beyond that unless the specific owners of the entity have done something that was intentional. In other words, I can't, be the owner of a business, then punch somebody in the face and walk away and say, ha, I assaulted you, so I'm not liable. So there are certain things debts that you can't get away from, but specifically, unless somebody can figure out a way to pierce the corporate veil, basically, you don't necessarily have to file bankruptcy in those positions, but it's typically the better way to do it. And the reason being is that you want to when you have a business, you want to get rid of any potential risks that you could have debt down the road. Now, people do not know this.
Let me dig deeper on that, though, a second, if I can. You hit on something, and I want our audience to understand that.
Do you have a shovel?
Well, yeah, I have a shovel.
You can only dig
a little
with
deeper.
a shovel. Okay.
Yeah,
so.
I think it's time to dig deep. So it's interesting you said that. You said, well, the assets of the company is all I can take. Well, let's say I've built this company from scratch for the last 10, 15 years. I've worked my fingers to the bone on it. Does that mean with bankruptcy, as soon as I do this, I'm just going to lose all that, everything I've done? Is that what that means?
Not necessarily. It depends on how much. So, for instance, we need to know specifics. Okay, we can't deal with a hypothetical. So, first of all, if you have $10 million of assets and you have $20 million of debt and you're filing bankruptcy, well, yes, you're probably going to lose it all. Okay, but if you're filing bankruptcy and you certain times you may just need an opportunity, like a coronavirus situation, whereby, you know what, once this thing gets worked out, I think my business is going to be fine and continue on the trajectory that it was, and I will be making my money again. So I can file different forms of bankruptcy. If you qualify a 13, although that's not typical, or an 11, that you can file a bankruptcy whereby you're paying your creditors back over time. You do not have to pay your creditors back 100 cents on the dollar. That's many reasons why people will file these bankruptcies. So for an example, if you have a company that owes $10 million of debt, and let's say your company is making a $1 million profit per year, well, you can come up with a reorganization plan passed by your creditors by paying $1 million a year for the next 5 years, and you're paying it out over 5 years, not all at once. You pay your creditors back the past due debt of $5 million. Now you've paid $5 million out of 10. The other $5 million goes away, and you've got 5 years to pay back half of it. That's not a bad deal. And many people have filed bankruptcies and survived and been very successful afterwards. It's not what many people refer to as bankruptcies. They think it's the end. That's only in liquidation, and not everybody's filing liquidation. So it can be a very good way. Even people in lawsuits can do that. I've had people that have had lawsuits and they've had a $2 million judgment and they only have $500,000 in the bank and no way to pay it back. But they can pay back that $2 million over 5 years. That's 60 months. That gives them a lot of room to maneuver. And so it depends on your situation. This isn't cookie cutter, one size fits all.
Okay, that's great. Now, what about the partnerships and non-corporate type entities? What happens with those people?
Okay, so for instance, one thing you have to be aware of in partnership is if you're not so you can be what's called a general partnership, where you're all general partners. Okay, that's closer to a sole proprietor. However, you can also have what's called a limited partnership. In the limited partnership, there's a general partner, okay, and then you have a whole bunch of limited partners, which are kind of like investors, and they're putting money in the company. The limited partners are protected. The general partner is not protected. In a standard partnership, you have two partners. They're all both general partners. In a partnership, like a general partnership, both partners are joint and severally liable. What does that mean? It means that if one guy has $20 million in a house and the other guy has nothing, and somebody gets a $5 million judgment, they can go to one partner and take the entire $5 million from that one person. Okay? In a partnership or a sole proprietorship, you do not have that limited liability protection. So the debt is going to have to be paid out, or you're going to have to file bankruptcy to get rid of that debt in some manner. Whereas a corporation and the LLC and limited partnership, you don't have to file bankruptcy. It's just a good way to wrap up the business, but you don't have to do it that way. But you have no option. And if you're going to be a general partnership, so you and John Smith decide to go into business together, well, Alex and John Smith are going to be both liable, and the creditor can go after either one of them. In a sole proprietorship, obviously it's you, so they can come after you personally, and you're not protected anymore, so they can come after any of your assets. So if you own a house in Malibu, I didn't want everyone to know, but Alex does have this 28-acre estate in Bel Air that's worth over $20 million. So anyone that needs to sue him, they can call him up. But anyway, the reality is, if you're a sole proprietorship,
it's 29 acres. Get it right. It's 29 acres.
Well,
yeah,
exactly.
Let's be honest.
Well, that's because the government took over an acre because of a taking. But the reality is you don't have any protection as a sole proprietor, and you don't have any protection as a general partner. So you're more likely in those situations to end up having to file bankruptcy. You might be able to get away with it as a corporation, although it's not advised, but you might be able to get away with it. Many people that have a corporation, they just stop doing business and that's it. Because unless they can go through the corporation, get to the individual shareholders or the individual partners in a limited liability partnership, there's no way that anyone will be able to collect. But it's certainly better to be incorporated or an LLC or an LLP than a partnership, whatever. But let's get to some more of the basics about bankruptcy. Alex, before the break, and I don't know if everybody heard it, he asked a question about what is the automatic stay. Was that your question?
Yeah, I asked that
Alex?
right before the break.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, I don't.
I really want to understand. I don't really understand it.
I think we had gone off the air, and so the automatic stay is probably the most important provision of a bankruptcy. What the automatic stay says is that in the event anybody shall file bankruptcy, and that's any one of the bankruptcy chapters, doesn't matter if it's a 9, 12, 11, 7, or 13, whatever bankruptcy you file, there's something called an automatic stay. The automatic stay says you cannot take any action whatsoever against the debtor. Any action whatsoever against the debtor. That means if you were in court and on that day you had an eviction trial and you're going to try to evict that person because you've been going for 6 months to get that person evicted, well, that automatic stay will come in and prevent the eviction. You could have an injunction that was going to be entered into that day. You could have a judgment that was had already been gone to the sheriff, and the sheriff was at your bank, and he was going to hand it to the bank officer, and the bank officer received a writ of attachment saying, I'm going to take $6 million out of Alex's slush fund account. I'm sorry, everybody now knows. And that automatic stay will prevent it. You could have a trial the next day, and it will prevent it. So the automatic stay is a very, very powerful tool. Also for foreclosure. So your house could have gone through foreclosure. The sale date is, we're selling your house on the steps of the courthouse on April 3rd. I present you on April 3rd, an hour before that foreclosure sale, a copy of the bankruptcy petition. The automatic stay comes into play and stops it. However, having said that, there are many, many exceptions that can take effect once you do file. So in many, many events, the automatic stay may prevent someone from taking action against you forever or during the pendency of the bankruptcy. However, people are allowed to file what's called a motion. It's a court motion in the bankruptcy court requesting time to go ahead and say, you know what, the automatic stay should be lifted because, A, we were in court, we're on the steps of the house to be foreclosed, or any other event that we were talking about here. You can actually go to court and ask the court for relief from the automatic stay to continue because we're so far along in the process. And many, many times the judge will grant it. But the reality is that we're talking about a situation where your house is going to be sold in 2 hours. Well, if somebody has to go back now and go to court and file a motion for relief and then go back and go through the process of noticing a new trustee sale, unless it's continued, you could be anywhere from 30 days to months. Why? Because many, many times people won't go out and retain an attorney to go through that process, or they don't know it, or they don't want to deal with it, and they'll just wait for the bankruptcy to proceed. So many, many times, even though they could get relief from the stay, they don't get relief from the stay. Now, if they do get relief from the stay, you're still going to be buying yourself some time period. The shortest time period would be an unlawful detainer where somebody's trying to take over the property, and you can probably get into court, maybe 14 or 20 days. But that's still 14 or 20 days sooner than under any other process. So it definitely buys you time. And that's why the automatic stay is a very, very powerful tool of bankruptcy. Did I answer your question, Alex?
I think you did. The next piece of this is that's all great, real legal talk about how we handle bankruptcy. But in the sense of things, most of us are looking at this business and we're saying we need this relief from debt at this critical time because, hey, we didn't expect the economy just to fall off and and just die. But if I'm looking at doing a bankruptcy as my only way of surviving, what do I need to do to make a determination what type I do? Can I make it through? Can I restructure and reorg? Or do I just have to close the business down? Who can help me with that? How do I figure that out?
Well, there are going to be three people that you're going to be dealing with. One, potentially, is a bankruptcy attorney. Two, an accountant, because a lot of this is based on accounting and functions. I have an accounting degree as well, although I don't practice. And three is you and yourself, because there is some type of moral compass that everybody has to determine how they want to deal with these situations. There is a fourth, and that's the government, because at any time the government can come in and say, we're going to offer this. I mean, right now they're offering, under this stimulus package, certain benefits to people. So the government can also come in and make a play. But really what you need to do is, so in bankruptcy, you take all of everything you own and everybody you owe, and you put it into the box, and it's called a bankruptcy estate. So you need to have a list, and you need to have a list of all the assets that you have, everything you own, and all the debts and everybody you owe money to, and even potential people that you may owe money to because you may be involved in a lawsuit or something else. And that all goes into this box. And then you have to determine what exemptions you have, because the law provides certain exemptions to certain people based on whether they own a house or don't own a house, or whether or not this is solely for the business or not. And you have to go, whether or not a married couple is filed together or separately, and you have to go through that. When you go through all that have all that information, then an analysis can be made about what is your best step. And if you don't know that, even not filing bankruptcy, even if you don't want to know about it, you still should be doing that. Make a list of everybody you owe money to, and a list of everything you own. And if you're not filing bankruptcy, at least have that list. Then you can figure out, okay, I owe X dollars. This is how much money I have. If I file bankruptcy, this is how it would work after speaking to the bankruptcy attorney. If I don't file bankruptcy, then the other approach would be, okay, can I make a deal with my creditors to try to keep them? Because I don't want 20% interest. I don't want to be going to collection agencies. I mean, one of the things bankruptcy does is it stops all that action from the automatic stay. So you need to see what you have. You can't analyze if you don't know. So the accountant or you, if you have the skill, can get that information together. Then you need to sit down with yourself and determine, after you've spoken to the bankruptcy attorney, know what your possibilities are there, what is the best approach, and then you make an informed decision. That's pretty much the steps.
And so, I think that's a great thing. Obviously, everybody has to make that decision themselves as to how to move forward on a bankruptcy or not moving forward on a bankruptcy. But if someone decides, well, bankruptcy, they run through this, and they go, bankruptcy isn't for me, do they have any other course of action to be able to work with creditors and other people in order to slow down the problems they have?
Okay, so first of all, as we said, one of the main benefits of a bankruptcy is the automatic stay. That's automatic, and it automatically stops everything. That gives you the tool to negotiate with creditors. If you don't file the bankruptcy, then you only really have limited options. One option, okay, as we said, is based on politics. For instance, right now there's a moratorium on evictions right now, right? So if you didn't pay your rent, you're going to have to pay your rent to get it taken care of. But if you don't pay your rent, but you're going to have your rent available before the moratorium for evictions on the government stops on May 30th or later, okay, then you know that as long as you can get the money together between now and May 30th, you'll be fine. So that's not an issue, okay? But the other way, and all three methods, bankruptcy, not filing bankruptcy, or the government, it all comes down to negotiations. You have to contact your creditors and work out arrangements. If you don't work out an arrangement with every single creditor, that may or may not be, may force you into filing bankruptcy. So you may have 20 creditors and 16 you've negotiated with and are willing to help you out, and 4 say, screw it, you sign the contract, too bad, and whether or not you have enough funds from that transaction to do it, or whether or not you need to say, well, I'll just file bankruptcy, and then when I file the bankruptcy, then I can force those 4 creditors that weren't doing what they wanted to come to the table and make the deal. It is, it can be a very, very strong atmosphere. But every one of them require you to negotiate with your creditors, except the bankruptcy. The bankruptcy would allow you typically to say, hey, listen, I'm done, and this is what it is, and you take it or leave it. Without the bankruptcy, it is going to require some negotiation. I think we have about a minute before taking a break.
Well, yeah, we're actually going to be taking a break a little bit, like pretty soon.
Okay. Well, that answers a lot of that question on how it's actually put together and done. And I think after the break, maybe we could talk a little bit more about some of the steps someone might want to take if they need to go down this road. If that sounds okay.
That's fine. And we're going to be taking a break. We'll be right back. We're 1220 KHTS 1220 AM and 98.1 FM. And I'm going to speak to the engineer because the and button is not working.
If you have a business problem, if someone doesn't honor their agreement and you need an aggressive attorney with over 27 years experience, the Law Office of Peter Bronstein has helped partners resolve disputes, franchisees resolve disputes, and other business owners who have a challenge. Let the Law Office of Peter Bronstein take your stress away. Visit lacorporateattorney.com. Don't wait too long and lose your rights. Solve your business challenge problem today. Visit lacorporateattorney.com.
Dreaming of becoming the next Steph Curry or Klay Thompson, or maybe just you want your kid to look good and have fun on the court? Introducing the Shotmaster. The Shotmaster is a revolutionary basketball training aid that isolates the shooting pocket, allows you to develop that consistent shot. Shotmaster will improve your shooting efficiency, accuracy, and shooting percentages dramatically. It's the ultimate training device. There's nothing like it. Visit shotmaster.net and discover for yourself how Shotmaster will become your game changer. Shotmaster.net.
Live life juiced up at Juice It Up Valencia. Come in and try our great tasting smoothies, protein shakes, acai, and wheatgrass for your healthy lifestyle on the go. Also, enjoy our 10 flavors of tantalizing zinc frozen yogurt and selection of healthy toppings. Juice It Up Valencia is located at the corner of Newhall Ranch Road and Copper Hill Drive in the Office Depot Plaza. Open Monday through Saturday from 7 a.m. until 9 p.m. and Sundays from 8 until 8. And remember to live life juiced up at Juice It Up Valencia.
Chiquita Canyon Landfill takes the waste from our homes and local businesses and puts it to good use. With cutting-edge clean energy technology, Chiquita Canyon powers 10,000 homes each year by harnessing the methane gas from the landfill. So, the next time you wheel your trash can to the curb, feel good that your waste is on its way to making green energy at Chiquita Canyon.
Chiquita Canyon Landfill, our partner in sustainable living.
Hi, I'm Pastor Rusty from Real Life Church with a minute of encouragement. Fear is always reduced when you help others rather than think primarily about yourself. When you get stuck in your own head, your world shrinks and your leadership becomes smaller. It's similar to a person who becomes critically ill. All their effort and energy rightfully and understandably moves to getting better. They don't have the ability to do anything other than focus on themselves. When you find ways to invest in and help others, you become a bigger and stronger leader and person. Your confidence rises and you become more effective. It may be nothing more complicated than an encouraging word or a sincere prayer, but that may be more life-giving than any of your more sophisticated strategies. During this COVID-19, we'll get through this the way we get through everything, together.
If you would like prayer, text the word prayer to 661-270-7788.
It's like no other station I've ever listened to. It's great.
Your hometown station.
Welcome. You're listening to the Ask Brien radio show. Mr. Engineer, how do you spell Ask Brien?
Brien.
You're listening to KHTS 1220 and 98.1 FM. We have our guest host, Alex Grossman. Some people like to scream his name for some reason. I don't know why. I think that's the button that my engineer has been using lately, but we'll talk to him later. anyway, we're talking about people due to this coronavirus are having serious financial problems. One of the possibilities is bankruptcy. It's not the only possibility, and there are ways, even with bankruptcy around, that you can find other methods to continue your operation. But it is something that we've had a lot of questions, a lot of information about, and our co-host Alex Grossman had some questions. And why don't you go ahead, Alex?
Yeah, I think, and I think it's a really good conversation. By the way, a lot of people are worried about this, and bankruptcy is usually the last thing on anybody's mind. How do I keep my business going? What do I do? How do I pay the bills? But when you face this, I often find that there's always, especially in a small business, there's always one big creditor you have. You have a bunch of small creditors, probably can carry them, but you have this one big creditor. So as an option to bankruptcy, is it possible to just work out something with one of those creditors and pay the others, and maybe pay this creditor just a few % per month and maybe pay the others off? Is that a bad strategy? And if you do that and you work this out and then they come back to you later and say, no, I don't want to do this, do you still have the option of bankruptcy? Because it seems like, that's a nuclear option. So is that doable?
Well, first of all, I want to go over a couple of things. If you go ahead and make any of these plans with a creditor, because you can always negotiate with the creditors at any time. But if you make a plans with a creditor and you're going to give a creditor a better deal than anybody else, you may have a problem down the road if you decide that you did want to file bankruptcy, because there is something in the bankruptcy code called preference. So if you make a deal with a creditor that is a director, officer, 5% shareholder, your wife, whatever, a relative, whatever, if you make those are what we call insiders. If you make a transaction like that and you file bankruptcy within 1 year, then they can go back and unravel that transaction. So that's one risk you have. Okay.
So let me stop you a second on that. So what you're saying is that if I think that my company can't make the bills this month and I pay myself or my wife, who happens to be my CTO, I pay them a big bonus because I think I better get this money out of the company, and then I go bankrupt, I might get in trouble for that?
Well, yeah, that's absolutely what a preference is, unless it's in the regular course of business. So, for instance, if every year you are taking a salary of $10,000 a month, and that's your salary, okay, and now before you file bankruptcy, you're still taking that $10,000, that's fine. But you said you're paying a bonus, okay? Now, you'd have a hard-pressed time to show you still can get around it, potentially, depending on the circumstances. But if you're paying your wife a bonus specifically to take the money out of the company and give it to your wife, that's a slam dunk preference, because you've already determined that your intent was to get money out of the company and give it to your wife. Okay, so that's a slam dunk. The closer thing that I think you might have been referring to is, okay, my wife gets a bonus every March based on what happens from January to December, okay, and I have 3 employees, and all 3 employees are getting that bonus. That's a much different circumstance, okay? But it still is going to be more highly scrutinized when it's going to somebody like the wife or an insider or a 5% shareholder, officer, director in a company. So you have to be very, very careful in those situations. We've got about a minute left, so I didn't want to get too much into that situation, but I did want to point out that we have so many questions from the show that we may have to continue this show, and this might just be part 1 because there's so many issues that can come up. But we'll see what the survey is and what our listeners want, and if they want more, then we will continue this next week. Otherwise, we'll bring on a new guest. But we have to see what's going to happen there. Thank you very much. You've been listening to the Ask Brien radio show on 1220 AM and 98.1 FM with my co-host, Alex Grossman. Thank you very much, and stay safe.